She wanted to move into her ex's house with her daughter. When I refused, they left for weeks. Now they're back, but is it too late to save us? My wife, let's call her Stella, and my stepdaughter, Leah, have been living with me for the past 3 years. Stella is 42, and I'm 46. We started dating 5 years ago and tied the knot 2 years back. Leah is 16 now, and ever since Stella's divorce 12 years ago, she's had full custody of her. Stella and her ex-husband were high school sweethearts. They got married right after finishing college, but as she told me, their relationship wasn't meant to last. Her ex was ambitious, too ambitious, I'd say, and once they got married, he started taking her for granted. He spent more time chasing his career than being at home. She even tried marriage counseling to salvage things, but nothing worked. After 6 years of trying, she called it quits and demanded full custody of Leah. Stella didn't trust her ex to be a hands-on father without her around, and, to be fair, she was right. He didn't even fight her on it and settled for weekend visits. About 3 years after their divorce, Stella decided to move for better career opportunities. That's how she ended up in my town. She got a job here, which is just a 6-hour drive from her hometown, so visiting her parents was still manageable. Her ex could also continue his weekend visits with Leah. Of course, her decision to move didn't sit well with him. It made seeing his daughter more inconvenient, which only worsened their already strained relationship. Things completely fell apart between them after Stella married me. From that point on, he only interacted with her if it was about Leah. When her ex was first diagnosed with heart problems, Stella tried to extend an olive branch. She wanted to be there for him, but he shut her out. He made it clear he didn't want her involved in his life, so she stopped trying. In his final days, we kept our distance, respecting his wishes. After he passed, we learned he had left his house to Leah, not Stella, a move we'd anticipated, given how things ended between them. The house, back in their hometown, sparked a lot of excitement for Stella and Leah. They started celebrating as soon as they heard the news, which I didn't really understand. We already had a home, my home, here. Their excitement turned into plans almost immediately. They started talking about moving into the house, renovating it, and starting fresh. This didn't sit well with me. My entire life is rooted here, my work, my friends, my family. When I saw them getting carried away, I stepped in to voice my discomfort. I told them I wasn't okay with leaving everything behind to move to that house. My reaction seemed to catch them off guard, which surprised me. They should have known how I'd feel. Stella tried reasoning with me, saying she'd been here for years and missed her family and friends. She felt it was only fair for me to make sacrifices now, just as she had. But I saw it differently. She didn't move here for me, she moved for herself. She didn't even know me then. When I pointed this out, she got upset. It became clear they weren't really interested in my perspective, they'd already made up their minds. For days, we went back and forth, arguing about it. Eventually, Stella and Leah decided to visit the house without me. They said I was welcome to join them if I changed my mind, but they wouldn't wait for me. And then, they left. Their departure felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't help but feel abandoned, all because I didn't want to uproot my life. Honestly, one of the main reasons I couldn't bear the idea of moving was the house itself. It used to belong to Stella and her ex-husband when they were together. Apparently, he'd bought it back a few years ago for sentimental reasons, even though he didn't live there. Moving into that house would have made me feel like an outsider. On top of that, everything I care about is here, my family, my friends, and my work. Leaving it all behind just didn't make sense to me. After they left, I kept my feelings bottled up. I didn't think they'd care if they knew how hurt I was. But once they were gone, I finally broke down. I called my parents to share what had happened, hoping they'd have some advice. Unfortunately, even they didn't have a solution to offer. They told me they'd only be gone for a few days, but nearly 2 weeks passed without a word from them. Not only had they left me, but they'd also completely stopped talking to me after our fight. That silence is what really broke me. I had hoped that once they came back, I could sit down with Stella and try to work things out. But after nearly 10 days without any contact, I started second-guessing my decision to wait. On the 12th day, I reached out to my lawyer. I told him maybe it was time to start drafting divorce papers because I couldn't see another way out of this mess. Thankfully, my lawyer is also an old friend, and he urged me to hold off. He suggested I at least talk to Stella when she returned or give her a call before making such a big decision. So, I decided to wait until she got back. I figured I'd give our marriage one last shot before walking away. 2 days later, Stella and Leah finally returned in the evening, looking frazzled and worn out. I let them in, hoping they'd come back ready to apologize or at least acknowledge how hurtful they'd been. But instead, they immediately launched into a conversation about the house. Stella explained that they'd decided to put the idea of moving there on hold. Apparently, the house was in far worse condition than they'd expected. The pictures the lawyer had shown them must have been years old because the place was practically unlivable now. They talked non-stop about what a disaster the house was: filthy floors covered in bat and bird droppings, a serious termite infestation, mice running around, and amenities that didn't work. It was clear the house hadn't been cared for since Stella's ex owned it. For a full 2 weeks, they'd stayed with Stella's parents while trying to figure out the next steps. They'd even consulted the lawyer to see if Leah could get ownership of the house sooner, but unfortunately, the will didn't allow for that. The trust for the house would remain under the lawyer's control until Leah turned 18, and only then would she legally own it. They kept talking about how much time they'd spent working through all this with the lawyer, trying to fast-track the process so they could move in by the end of the year. But the probate process was slow, and they'd finally come to terms with the fact that it wasn't happening anytime soon. That's why they decided to come back. After listening to all this, I finally spoke up. I told Stella it was great that they'd sorted things out for now because I was no longer interested in living with her anymore. I told her how deeply hurt and disrespected I felt, especially since she hadn't even tried to apologize for what happened. I asked her to leave. She was stunned. She quickly told Leah to go to her room so we could talk privately. Once we were alone, I told her the only reason I let them back into the house was because I thought they'd come to apologize. I could understand Leah not saying anything, she's just a kid. But Stella? She's an adult. She knew what she was doing. And honestly, it felt like the only reason she'd come back at all was because the house wasn't livable. If it had been in good condition, I doubted she'd have returned, and we'd probably already be heading for divorce because I wasn't going to budge on my decision to stay here. I explained all this to her and said it was better to part ways now rather than drag things out, only to end up separated later. That's when she lost it. She started yelling at me, calling me unreasonable and stupid. She said I was the one giving up on our marriage over something so petty and accused me of not being serious about us. She brought up, yet again, how she'd spent years living here near my family and friends, and the least I could do was spend some time in her hometown with her family and friends. She said it was selfish of me to refuse, and now, because they didn't feel the need to apologize for something that wasn't even their fault, I was threatening to end our marriage. I tried to respond, but she wouldn't let me get a word in. She just kept shouting, calling me a horrible person for not understanding her feelings and making her out to be the villain. She even called me a crybaby, saying I should man up and support my wife and stepdaughter. Finally, she told me if I really wanted her and Leah gone, they'd leave. But before walking away, she made sure to let me know she thought I was being a coward and acting selfishly. Selfish. That's what Stella called me, selfish for not wanting to move to her hometown, even though she'd spent years living in mine. But honestly, it's not the same thing, is it? She made that decision for herself back then, and I wasn't forcing her to stay here. Now, she's asking me to uproot my life, leave everything I've ever known, and start over somewhere I don't belong. How is that the same? And cowardly. That one cut deeper. She said I should have been there for her and Leah, but instead, I let my feelings get in the way. In her eyes, I was too wrapped up in myself to care about what they needed. She said I was making them out to be villains just because I couldn't handle the fact that we didn't agree. Her words kept playing in my head long after she left. She already had her bags packed when she came back that evening, so all she had to do was grab Leah and walk out the door. I didn't stop them. I couldn't. I haven't reached out since. Her friend called me a couple of days ago to let me know they're staying with her. She told me Stella and Leah were angry and that if I wanted to fix things, I needed to act fast. But here I am, 2 days later, paralyzed. I don't even know where to begin. Am I really the bad guy here? Am I wrong for wanting to leave my wife because she wants to move back to her hometown? Update 1. First off, thank you to everyone who left a comment or gave me advice. It means a lot, and I've read through everything carefully. The more I think about it, the more it's clear what's really bothering me. If the house had been in better condition and the legalities had worked out, Stella and Leah wouldn't have come back at all. That's the part one can't seem to shake. It's like I'm the backup plan, the second choice, the fallback option. I know none of this is Leah's fault. She's just a kid. I've watched her grow up over the years, and I love her like she's my own. She doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of all this. But Stella? That's a different story. She's an adult. She keeps saying I'm blaming her and making her out to be the bad guy, but I feel like she's doing the same thing to me. It's like she's gaslighting me, making me question my own feelings and believe that I'm the one at fault for all of this. She's invalidated my emotions at every turn, and the names she's called me, crybaby, selfish, coward, they've been weighing on me. It's hard to deal with, especially alone. I feel sorry for all of us. For years, we were a happy family, or at least, I thought we were. Now, it feels like everything's falling apart, and I don't know how to stop it. I didn't want this to happen, but what choice do I have? If Stella came back with a genuine apology, I'd be ready to forgive her and try to fix this. I love her, and I want to make this work. But she has to want that too. Right now, it doesn't feel like she does. She hasn't reached out to me at all since she left. Not a word. The last message I have from her was over 2 weeks ago, before any of this even started. I've been holding out hope, but how long can I wait for someone who doesn't seem to care? Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and this afternoon, Stella and Leah came back. For a brief moment, I thought maybe they were here to talk, maybe to fix things. But when I opened the door, Stella told me they were only there to pack up the rest of their things. They brought a pickup truck and a friend to help them, so I knew this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They were serious. That crushed me. I'd been holding out hope, waiting for Stella to reach out, to give me a sign that maybe we could still salvage this. Instead, she was ready to walk away, just like that. I couldn't let her leave without saying something. I asked if we could talk in private, and when we did, I told her how disappointed I was. We'd spent years together, and I thought we were stronger than this. I didn't understand how she could give up on us so easily. She looked tired, like she'd already made up her mind. She said she was sick of fighting with me, and it wasn't like leaving brought her any joy. But she also said I owed her an apology. I knew if I argued, we'd just end up in the same place we always did, going in circles, blaming each other. She thought I owed her an apology for not supporting her, and I felt the same way about her. So instead of rehashing old arguments, I told her what happened was in the past. All we could do now was try to move forward. I said we owed it to each other, to our relationship, to give things another chance, a real chance. For a moment, I thought she might agree. But then she said she was disappointed too. She said she didn't think trying again would work because, in the end, she still wanted to move back to her hometown. That was her plan all along, to leave. She said she was tired of living here and wanted to be close to her family and friends. She'd made her decision, and no matter what I said, it wasn't going to change. So, it wasn't just about the house. All this time, I thought the house had been the tipping point, the thing that triggered everything. But when Stella told me her decision to move back wasn't just about the house, that it had been in her heart all along, it caught me completely off guard. I had assumed this was a phase, something I could talk her out of, but hearing her admit that she truly wanted to go back, not because of the house but because she missed her family and hometown, made me realize how deeply I had misunderstood her. She told me that staying with her parents over those 2 weeks reminded her of everything she'd been missing. The connection with her family, the familiar surroundings, it all felt like home to her in a way that our life here never had. She said she'd fought with herself about it, even tried to convince herself to hate me to make leaving easier, but in the end, she couldn't. She knew I had valid points too. I sat there, stunned. I convinced myself that her decision was impulsive and temporary, but now I saw how long she'd been wrestling with this. It wasn't a whim, it was something she truly thought through. For the first time, I really listened. I didn't argue or try to change her mind because, honestly, I was tired too. Tired of the fights, the tension, the constant back and forth. When she asked me if I'd consider moving back with her, I told her I needed time to think about it. Until that moment, I had believed this was a situation I could reason my way out of, but clearly, it wasn't. She said she understood and told me to take all the time I needed. But she also made it clear that she wasn't going to change her mind. She wanted to be closer to her family and her roots, and if I couldn't accept that, she was prepared to move on without me. After that, she went back to packing, and I just sat there, trying to process everything. The weight of her words, the finality of her decision, it was overwhelming. Even when she was leaving, she gave me space, saying I still had time to decide, but the choice was mine. I found myself wishing I hadn't opened the door that day. Before, it had been easier to be angry at her, to see her as the one who was being unreasonable. But now that I understood where she was coming from, I couldn't be angry anymore. I just felt lost. Update 3. After 3 weeks of thinking everything over, I finally reached out to Stella and told her my decision. I wouldn't be moving to her hometown with her. It wasn't an easy choice, far from it. But I had to be honest with myself about what I could and couldn't do. My entire life is here, my family, my friends, and my business. I've spent years building my company from the ground up. It's not just a job, it's a part of me. I couldn't imagine handing it over to someone else or selling it off just to start over in a place where I had no connections. So, with a heavy heart, I told Stella that I couldn't follow her. And because of that, we couldn't stay married. She deserves the freedom to live her life the way she wants to, and I deserve the same. When I told her, she seemed disappointed but not angry. She said she understood and wished me the best for the future. She also asked me to forgive her and see things from her perspective, which I already had. I knew it couldn't have been easy for her to live so far from her family all these years. She left her hometown to build a life of her own, to step out of her comfort zone and find independence. But now, at this stage in our lives, she wanted to go back to what was familiar and comforting. I couldn't blame her for that. We agreed to file for divorce amicably, but we both knew there was one more thing to figure out: Leah. Leah had been very upset about leaving me behind. Stella admitted she hadn't let Leah contact me because she wasn't sure where things stood between us. But now that we'd come to a decision, she asked me how I felt about staying in Leah's life. Without hesitation, I told her I wanted to. I've watched Leah grow up over the years, and I think of her as my own daughter. Losing Stella is hard enough, I couldn't bear to lose Leah too. Stella and I agreed to work something out, whether it's partial custody or visitation rights. For now, she's letting me meet Leah again, and I'm finally going to see her after all this time. Update 4. I just got back from seeing Leah and Stella, and my heart is full. It's only been 3 days since my last update, but those 3 days felt like an eternity as I tried to process everything. The reality of the divorce, the finality of losing Stella, it's a lot to take in. But seeing Leah again made all of that feel a little more manageable. Leah ran up to me the moment she saw me, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. We hugged, and I could see how much she'd missed me. She told me she was sad about everything that had happened but was glad we'd get to spend time together again. Stella and I talked briefly after that. It was cordial, almost bittersweet. We both know this is the right decision, even if it's painful. I told her I appreciated her letting me stay in Leah's life, and she said she'd never wanted to take that away from me. For the first time in weeks, I feel a sense of peace, not because everything is resolved, but because I know we're all trying to move forward in the best way we can. There's still a lot to figure out, but at least now, I can see a path forward. And for the first time in a long time, that gives me hope. After telling Stella my decision, I tried to convince myself that I'd made peace with it. But the truth is, the more I thought about it, the more I regretted it. Talking to her had made everything feel painfully real, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made the wrong choice. Still, I knew I couldn't go back on my word, so I had to suck it up and mentally prepare myself to see her again. When I walked into her friend's apartment where she'd been staying, everything hit me at once. I broke down, right there in front of her. And then she did too. In that moment, I realized why we'd been avoiding each other. It wasn't anger or resentment keeping us apart. It was the fact that deep down, we both knew the second we saw each other, we wouldn't be able to hold back. No matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise, I couldn't resent her. I still loved her. And when I looked at her, I could tell she felt the same way. We hugged each other tightly, crying like we hadn't seen each other in years. It had only been a few weeks, but it felt like an eternity. Through her tears, Stella told me she'd been so sure about moving back to her hometown, leaving everything behind, but now, she wasn't sure anymore. Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. Finally, we were on the same page. She'd been the one to take the initiative to say it, and I couldn't have been more relieved. After what felt like hours of tears, hugs, and talking, we came to a decision. We weren't going to rush into anything. Instead, we'd put all our plans on hold and go to marriage counseling. If there was even the slightest chance we could work through our differences and save our marriage, we wanted to take it. Honestly, I'd only gone over to see Leah. I didn't expect any of this. But I'm so glad I did because it feels like everything is finally falling into place. Stella is still staying with her friend for now, but she'll be packing up and coming back home tomorrow. I can't wait. And as for Leah, she's absolutely thrilled. She was so upset about the idea of us separating, and now that we've decided to give our marriage another chance, she couldn't be happier. Of course, we know we can't just pretend nothing happened. All of this started because Stella felt distanced from her family, and we can't ignore that. So, we've made a promise to prioritize what's important. We're going to visit her family every weekend, not just once every couple of months. No more excuses, no more letting life get in the way. We've learned the hard way that the people we love deserve our time and effort, no matter how busy we get. For the first time in weeks, I feel hopeful. I love Stella, and knowing that she feels the same way is everything I needed to hear. Counseling won't fix everything overnight, but it's a start. And if we've made it this far, I think we can make it the rest of the way together.